In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
The nuns, grade school, right up there, baby. Christ the King, still doing it. Good morning. Thank y'all for coming. I feel like I have put a lot of pressure on parishioners in the last couple weeks with these conversations about money. And please come in and sit if you'd like, dear. My own background in the Episcopal Church is in parishes that did not, by bylaw, allow deficit budgets. That is not the case here. And what you have found, and as longtime parishioners have let me know, there's a real exhaustion to these mid-year solicitations. Nobody wants to hear them. Everyone feels like they give as much as they conceivably can give. And I appreciate that, but at the same time, the budget was passed. We have, $100,000 to make up. And how do we do that? What does that mean? I can't have any conversation with y'all about programmatic changes. It's certainly not in Angela's absence. All I can address with you guys is making up the deficit. And if that doesn't materialize over the next 4 or 5 months, then any programmatic changes will be a conversation with Angela and the vestry and the parish moving forward. So all I can really address today, I'm happy to, any topic you want to raise, I'm happy to put my limited experience and knowledge to work in answering it. But I know for a fact that programmatic changes can't happen at this point. I can't entertain that conversation. I don't know what shape they would take. So all that to be said.
Just to clarify, you're saying, John, that it is against the law for the church to revise the budget?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that
I'm talking about this budget.
Yeah, this budget, good question. Anything affecting this budget would be programmatic. So the vestry has to address those things ultimately. It's just that with Angela on sabbatical, I think we're constrained from making any substantive decisions.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah. So, but any conversation you want to have, I'm open to. I just don't think I'm in a position to do anything but come before you, set out the facts as I perceive them, and ask for your help. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
something that I think might be helpful is having a microphone. Have fun. What with the budget deficit that we have currently? What is it that are there specific things that we simply can't do? I mean, I know about the air conditioning in sacristy. That's an example.
Well, there are a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean things that because we spent what the endowment I think allocated.
Yeah, we probably have $10,000 left in unallocated endowment dollars if the Amerson House repairs are finally finished. We may have to dip into that remaining $10,000 for Amerson needs. We're not certain yet. I would just as soon get the roof repaired or the pothole repaired, because I'm never in the sacristy, but that's my selfishness speaking. Things we can't do. For instance, I learned this week that the parish retreat cost the parish $13,000 last year. Only $4,500 of that was collected. Yeah.
There was a correction made.
Yeah, right.
That we overpaid last year, so we're
Yeah.
gonna get credit back this year for that. And what we pay is supposed to be covered by everything that people pay when they sign up to come.
Right. So just to give y'all the sequence of things, I learned on Tuesday, 13,000, only 4,100 collected. The parish picked up 8,000 or so dollars. Well, it turns out 4,500 of that 8,000 was an overpayment to Camp Michael and their creditors, but it still left us 4,000 short for the parish retreat. So I did a quickie poll of the vestry. It's too important to cancel. If we have to dip into the remaining 100,000 in reserves to afford Camp Michael, then the feeling of the vestry was that we should, and that it should be. Should, yes, should happen. It's an important experience for a lot of parishioners. I haven't ever been. I'm not going to be able to go this year. We're going to be out of state. But the consensus was that it had to move forward. Likewise, just to point out, we need $5,000 to put a new rooftop package unit to service the air conditioning and heating needs of the sacristy. And because we're uncertain about Amerson, the roof, and the driveway, the idea was that we would prop the doors open and let air conditioning from elsewhere in the sanctuary cool that space. And that got some parishioners concerned who said, well, we'll privately raise the money among ourselves. And sounds good to me. Go for it. We'll make it happen. So, Sharon.
Okay, so two things. The first thing is, we were told, those of us who do spend a lot of time in the sacristy, that it would cost $30,000 to replace the air conditioning unit that services the sacristy.
Well, the last number I heard from Barry was 5,000, but that he's also talking about a package unit that would go through the wall.
Okay, that one is going to be $10,000, and that's the one we're going to raise the money among ourselves.
Okay.
So
Then,
that's the first step.
yeah,
The
please.
second is a question.
Yeah.
Is the $100,000 that we are in arrears?
Yeah.
Is that from the aspirational budget or from a real operating budget?
Well, I mean, the problem with that question is that expenses were always tightly controlled. So we didn't have an aspirational budget, as it were. We had aspirational fundraising. So we always knew expenses were going to be about $700,000, or so it appears.
They are every year.
And there was no evidence that we were going to, with no concrete evidence that we could make that budget happen. And we're seeing the fulfillment of that. We know that we have raised maybe $13,000 at this point for the 70th anniversary fund. You remember
Yes.
where? About 13,000. So, you know, that 100,000 had to be made up in two ways. One, the 70th anniversary fundraising campaign, and then a remaining 42,000, which no one could really claim they knew how we were going to raise. So that's what brought me to this number that I keep haranguing y'all about. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know what you call the fund. I know that we have like the $3 million
Yeah.
kind of future fund. And I think within that, there's a provision where you can use some of the funds for things
Yeah.
like the roof and what have you.
And what the Knox can define it for me, or Jim, there's some dire needs provision for a portion of the endowment. That dire needs applies to what big pool of money?
It is the
Endowment fund.
right. I've lost the word, but basically it's not our needs. It's the needs of the parish
Yeah.
for infrastructure, and that's not the word.
Yeah.
But this is infrastructure.
But we are using that money for things that, like the new air conditioning in the nave. We do get endowment funds every year, but only for capital expenses, meaning major, long-term, search and purchase.
But so like a roof and a.
Yeah, but the money for this year has been spent. And so we are planning the roof and the driveway in 2025 for sure. presuming the driveway will last to 2025, it's getting to be a little cavernous, that particular first pothole on the hillside. Yes, ma'am. You, Catherine?
You know, I've got a loud enough voice. Can you hear me down there?
Mhm.
This is for those watching at home.
Okay. I think they can hear me.
Those watching at home.
It's for the video.
Oh, all right. I wrote down 4 sentences to tell you why I am distressed. First, I do not endorse a deficit budget.
Mhm.
Period. I don't do it in my own life. I had responsibility for $500 million in other people's money. I did not believe in it there. So that's the first point. A deficit budget, I don't think is godly. The second thing is if there becomes an unexpected need that has not been anticipated. And I should say right now, I've been here 16 years. The last time I served on the vestry, we had such a time. And I spoke up at that point. But some things don't change. If we have an unexpected expense, example, 2 trees fall on our sanctuary. I mean, they happen. I understand that. Then if there is a need for special fundraising, ask for the fundraising to target something that I can know about.
Mhm.
I might pay for 2 trees to come off of the building, but to put more money down a black hole in a deficit budget, I'm not inclined to do. Because it just continues this mentality. The third thing that I wanted to say is I misunderstood the $70,000 request for our 70th.
Mhm.
I misunderstood it because this is our 70th anniversary. I'm all for taking up a collection to do something spectacular in terms of outreach, or social justice, or some of the things we say we believe in. Now, $4,000 for outreach, 15,000, excuse me. That's not what I'm talking about. But if we could have sent $70,000 to the school in Haiti, I might have stepped up. I don't want it to go to a deficit budget. And the last thing that I really want to say at this point is that we are a small church.
We're a small church who's lost a lot.
We are a small church and we're still acting as if we were a large church. I mean, I know this because my relatives are in small churches, which goes from about 74 average Sunday attendance to 130. We're small. We have 115 average Sunday attendance. We have got to change this mentality.
I have no problem with I agree completely. I didn't realize that we had a deficit budget.
Yeah.
I think another thing that we need to stop and consider, in the last 20 years, I was born and raised in Atlanta, right? There have been a number of old churches around us that are no longer here,
Right.
right? Those congregations died on the vine and they're gone.
Mhm.
I find that devastating. So I kind of feel like we're taking a last stand here. I love this church. I left for 4 years and continued dividing my tithe between the church where I was and this church because that's how much I love it. And now I've come back because I love it. So yes, we might be small, but by the same token, we also still want to grow into the future. So you have to semi have a foot in both places, right? Acknowledge that we're small, but do you not want us to grow?
Oh, yeah, I don't think anybody would argue with that. And what I have found in this last couple weeks of my pushing everybody is that no one dismissed me. Absolutely everyone took me seriously. They evidenced their love of this parish. They evidenced their commitment to me. They took my request very seriously. And that to me is the sign of a healthy parish. The parish I was in DC for 13 years, they hired a priest who was very controversial. The entire search committee quit within the first year of that woman being at the helm. All that to be said, parishes ebb and flow. If there is a slump in attendance and membership, I think, as Liv suggests, it's incredibly important for us to double down. There are 70 years of rich commitment to Jesus Christ, evidenced in this crowd, in this building, in this campus. And that's not for nothing. I'll give you that. Whatever it takes for us to survive, I think I'm willing to consider. I, for one, want to cut off the back parking lot, give Toco Hills a year to get organized, open up the easement driveway on the far side, sell that whole piece of land. I'd love to do that. I have no idea. That's just pie in the sky. Is it even legit, legal? It means Amerson House would be torn down. But you have to decide as a parish. I'm sorry, go ahead, Shirley.
Well, regarding that proposal,
Mm-hmm.
one huge ministry that happens on this property is Toco Hills.
Toco Hills.
And I would be appalled if you kissed them goodnight.
Yeah, and I would presume that any such pipe dream on my part would take 2 years to come to fulfillment. As popular as Toco Hills has become, I'm not even sure we're the right place for it. Go ahead, Neva.
I think the same way that everyone in this room feels.
Mm-hmm.
The place is important to me. However, reality is here.
Mm-hmm.
And I am with you in that raising funds for the budget is not where we ought to be. I think we ought to be thinking in terms of a smaller church.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I spoke with Angela was years ago when she first came, before Beverly left. And we were talking about the church and the financial affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, the first thing to do is to let some of the staff go. And by George, that's what happened with Beverly. I am thinking that rather than bewailing our manifold problems, we need to start planning for how we're going to address this. If letting the staff go is the first step, then maybe the cuts should be made across the board, a 10% reduction in everybody's salary. Not just, sorry, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah. And as I started this presentation, this is really the conversation we cannot have until Angela's back.
But you can hear from us.
Yes, absolutely. I should hear from y'all, and you should be thinking of yourselves. What I want to see happen this fall is some sort of visioning committee with young families and long-timers who sit down together, maybe with the aid of somebody from the diocese, and say, what is it? Why are we? What can we do to stay who we are? What can we do to become better than we are? So I think such a thing will have to happen. But again, I'm in this funny position in Angela's absence of being constrained. I feel like the only role I can play at this point is to give myself, Angela, and the vestry as many options as possible. And the one way I can pursue that currently is to ask for more money from you generous folks. Yes, ma'am.
I personally want to thank you. John, I thanked you after you made
Yeah.
your statement.
Yeah.
I might say also, John visited me at home because I told him I was disturbed. It's the first time I've had a pastoral visit since Beverly left. And the second thing is I wrote to Chris. Chris sent me a copy of the budget. And she said, thank you. And I appreciate everybody who's serving on the vestry. And I want to tell you, at least 10 years ago when I was on the vestry, we had signs of this. That's what I'm trying to say. This is a mentality and a culture issue. Because I stood in front of the church before and asked for people to give $1,000 more. So this has been long-standing. It is not something that is just recent.
Yeah. Go ahead, Neva.
I think this problem has been developing for a long time. And I don't think we can fix it with simply wanting to do what we want to do aspirationally. I don't think we can double down and give 34 or whatever it was a month. That can't happen.
A week.
32 a week?
So basically,
Yes.
$6 a month.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
Reality is here.
Right.
So we have, and I'm
Yeah.
not nailing you to the wall. I just want,
I don't know. I got the same initials.
and if you think we're throwing spears at you,
No,
We're
not
not.
at all. In fact,
But-
one of the great advantages I bring to this conversation is my relative newness to the parish. I have an outsider's perspective. I'm not wedded to any particular tradition or commitment, but one of the parishioners said to me too, actually, that they will never let go of St. Bart's because that's where their ashes are going. And it was such a profound and an emotional way to interact with this place. It brings me back to where we are, which is truly about life and death. The religion preaches resurrection. We see each other out at beautiful funerals here. It's a place worth saving. There's no question in my mind, and this group of folks are among the most committed to that very proposition. How we do that, I will defend myself on one point. I asked specifically for increased tithing, or not tithing, but at least increased pledging, so that this problem doesn't happen a year from now. You know, the one shot, I love the idea of you contributing to remove 2 trees off the roof. But that doesn't get the $3,000 electric bill we incurred for Vacation Bible School, or whatever the number was. Do you remember the surplus that we...
We used more electricity in that 1 week than we have used since before the pandemic.
Yeah. And nobody wants to pay the power bill. Truly. Not at their own home, not here. It's not a romantic gift, but it's incredibly required. Yes,
Nobody put a
Neva.
plaque on in Thanksgiving of.
Yeah, right.
Power bill.
Neva had her hand up first. Go ahead, Neva.
what I want to clarify is that we haven't had a chance to voice our concerns about this.
Yeah.
It's a can of worms that has not been addressed. So, begging your pardon,
Yeah.
you're the first one who has let us chime in.
Oh.
And I really, really appreciate that because I think it's a parish problem.
Yeah.
It is a parish.
Oh, there's no question about it. And I'm sorry, Catherine. You.
I think I've said enough.
Well, Alice has told me that, but I don't know if that's true overall.
I want to weigh in on one other thing.
Yeah.
We were talking with Knox about the endowment board. St. Bartholomew's endowment board is in my will. And that is because that money can go to outreach and, capital expenses. I wouldn't leave my money to go down the black hole of deficit budgets. So before you start wanting to take more from the endowment board, that is the kind of stewardship that I think God asks us for.
Yeah. And of course, it's self-defeating. We have an aging physical plant where we see week after week where the endowment money ought to be going.
Exactly.
If we start robbing from the endowment fund, then it's a downward spiral.
I'm not suggesting that we endlessly rob from it.
Yeah.
I do think it's not unreasonable to maybe even rewrite the covenants. We have to get out of the hole, right? The first thing is, you have to get out of debt.
Right.
And then we can build forward. So I'm not suggesting that we create an endless cycle of running a deficit and then endlessly taking from the endowment fund. I'm just suggesting it's worth considering, is it possible to somehow take from the endowment fund simply to take us out of the hole and then we...
Yeah. Meredith?
And Knox and Jim can clarify further, having served on the endowment board for 6 years, it is restricted.
Mm-hmm.
I went through and found where it was set up originally.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used for only the two things specified, and there's a formula for how much money can come out of it every year. It is not we go pull $50,000. It is not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a formula that calculates exactly how much money can be given, and the endowment board then says, vestry, here's what you got. You can use it for one of these two categories. And then if the vestry can figure out what's the most important thing, it's not a go back in and say, oh, we want another $5,000. It doesn't work that way. And the problem is, people who have donated to it have done so with the understanding this is how it's set up.
Exactly.
And
might
I-
pull out if you try
Yeah,
to
and
rewrite
other
it.
people like me, she's also in my will,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
because I know that it's done this way,
Mm-hmm.
with this formula, for these purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and the people who've passed away, I mean, we've had some surprisingly significant contributions from folks over the years that you would be surprised to find out the amount of money people have left.
Yeah. No, we've got a $3 million endowment for a parish this small. That's very, very rich.
Well, some of y'all may recall Mac said he would retire when the endowment fund got to be $1 million. And it did, and it's grown some.
It did, and he did. I agree with all of that, and it's, the endowment is also, part of my will and giving. What I'm saying is, if the church just goes under, what good is the endowment fund?
Right.
Period.
Nobody's suggesting that the church is going to go under. We still have $100,000 in reserves, which we could conceivably zero out to finish the year. Nobody in this room lives their personal economic life that way, however. It is abhorrent, I suspect, to most of you to think about zeroing out your savings. But, we don't, I think the budget probably includes full rental of all 3 apartments, which is not the case. We have only 1 occupied to my knowledge. It does acknowledge what the rent we'll get at Amerson House, but I fully expect expenses will stay very, very tightly controlled for the remainder of the year.
But high. But high.
But, well, how do you measure high? 85% of the budget is salary and, benefits, such as they are.
And the diocesan pledge.
And the diocesan pledge. And we're working on that. The parish appealed it a couple years ago. Chris is working on an appeal for this year. But it doesn't zero the diocesan commitment, which is what, 64,000? 68,000. And, the diocese gets this all the time for parishes. I did it in D.C. I didn't have to go through an appeal process. I just didn't write the check. And they couldn't really hound me because a very conservative Episcopal congregation in Chevy Chase was so pissed about Gene Robinson, they zeroed out for political reasons. So because St. Thomas's was struggling, I could get away with it because the one up on Chevy Chase Circle. I don't think that that's the case here. Certainly the procedures and the bureaucracy involved in the Diocese of Atlanta is infinitely more sophisticated than it was in DC, and they have a very rigid formula for appealing the assessment. As it turns out, you could ignore that formula, and Chris is going to write him a letter, and we'll see how far it goes. And I suspect they'll give us a de minimis. It's just like appealing your property taxes. They don't want to fight with you. They also don't want to lose the revenue, so they're going to reduce it marginally, and you'll be slightly better off than you were. But I'm thinking about December here and where we're going to be at the end of the year, and making sure that y'all know there's some tough decisions coming down the road, I suspect, and I'm not discounting God's blessings and the rich generosity of you folks. We are going to do better on the revenue side, I suspect. I don't think we're going to come up with 100,000 by any means. And I foresee a definite dip into reserves by the end of the year, a substantial dip, possibly. And but I also don't want the parish to die. I mean, we can't endlessly cut stuff, but we can, if we do a visioning process, some sort of understanding of what's critical to us. I think in 2025, we can produce a budget that's balanced, that also reflects what's key to everyone's understanding of this parish. And that's what I hope to see for 2025.
John?
Sir?
Okay, I was just going to comment on the diocesan commitment.
Yeah.
So about a decade ago, a little more, our diocese, we're unique in this, passed a canon, added to the Constitution. If we don't pay whatever the diocese assesses us, based on a formula that is canonical, the bishop can take over the parish, and the rector will come the vicar of St. Bartholomew's instead of a rector. And so those are the differences from where you were, because we were like, this diocese was like where you were during the Gene Robinson era. Some parishes just wouldn't write the check, and the diocesan council
just lived with it.
Yeah.
And is that based on the number of members in this parish?
No, it's a formula of average Sunday attendance and budget. And Catherine, do you want to share that sheet I gave you, and we'll give a copy to Sharon? This is the 2022 spreadsheet from the diocese of
I
how.
can't read it. I have to get Alice to read it.
Oh, okay.
It's a rolling average based on 3 years, I think, 3 or 4.
This is what the diocese statistics show. So I don't think any of the salaries are out of whack. I think probably Alex is underpaid. I think.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. I think probably Angela's right at where she should be, giving our average Sunday attendance and our budget. I don't have numbers for the music directors. Yes, Catherine?
I like your idea of, one thing I really miss about is the opportunity to hear from various age groups at St. Bartholomew's. So I would simply suggest, I like the idea of getting some people together, because these are tough choices, folks. Absolutely. What do you really want? You want to support a music program that's in our DNA, or a children's program, which is in our DNA? I mean, these are tough decisions. So I would love to hear from particularly the people who have children,
right?
The people who are in the choir, the people who've been at Wildcat. I'll say this about newcomers. I hate to welcome newcomers with the fact
that we are $100,000 in the, whatever, red.
In the red.
That is not any way to welcome people.
But it's also not unusual in Episcopal churches. I mean, St. Thomas at the Pot Circle, where I was, destroyed by an arsonist in 1970. They decide not to rebuild the sanctuary. They renovate the parish hall. They end up with a chunk of about $3 million in insurance money, which they continue to live on for the entire length of the time I was there. It was not a self-sufficient parish. However, they partnered with a developer. He bought half the land. They rebuilt the sanctuary. They are booming. I was at a church on Capitol Hill. The neighbors referred to it as the Church of the Damned. It was so tired, so that none of the lights worked. Capitol Hill turned around. Christ Church Capitol Hill turned around. I never discount God's movement in our lives. And what I need y'all to do is think about what's most important, hang on to that, and that's how we move forward, I think.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll have a visioning process in place. Yes?
Just one thing that isn't necessarily money. I think I realized that as COVID came and then left, so did people.
Right.
And so, to me, if I'm, and this is just me, so I'm not speaking to anyone else, if I'm a passive person who's watching something, I'm less likely to be involved, including financially, than if I'm here every week and I'm interacting with you. So how do we get back that group of people who are now passive members, not the ones who can't for whatever physical.
Yeah, right.
How do we get them back in the community? Because I think when you're interacting with people, you want to support the community that you're physically in.
Right.
So.
But we not only have people worshiping from home still, because that, has advantages, but we have a lot of people who joined other churches. They're not going to come back, I don't believe.
Some of them haven't moved their letters, but they are not attending this church.
Yeah, Mary Beth.
A couple of things. If y'all will look around, we have new people here who came during the pandemic.
Yeah.
When they started watching us online. We've had 2 weddings.
Yeah.
Of relatively new couples.
So,
and some of those are involved. But I like your idea of God, I hate committees.
Yeah. Visioning committees, a new paradigm for 2025.
But I think it's worthwhile to look at new families, long-time people, and medium people. I mean, there's some of all, to see what is it that means the most to you, those people who have been here for 30, 35, however many years, what has kept you here?
Right.
The new folks that came, what brought you here? And those of us more middle ground people of what's keeping you here, what do you want to keep you here going forward, aside from my ashes going down the river.
Right.
Which, yes, I'm sorry, that is important to me. But I think it's worthwhile to get something like that, to get input.
Right. And I think that process has to happen. But, I'm somewhat rudderless without Angela. She canonically is the boss here. I am only stepping in on some of her functions. I promise I haven't consecrated any bread or wine. So I cannot move forward with any of these ideas until she returns and I get some buy-in from her.
Yeah, it's just a few weeks.
Yeah, and it's just a few weeks. She'll be back here by August 8th. Yes.
I have 2 things to say.
Yeah.
One, I think this is very healthy, and I think probably you're acting like an interim rector would be, somebody who's having to do the heavy lifting and the dirty work.
Well, I don't feel like that.
All right, but that's what they do. They come in
Apparently my lungs think that.
and the second thing, the reason I came back here is I heard questions about air conditioning and whatnot
Yeah,
while I
right.
was up there, so I came back over here. I wanted to answer the question. The unit above the sacristy is 1995. It has never been replaced. We don't use it except for emergencies. The heat already doesn't work. It's only air conditioning and it's making lots of noise. So we just run it when there's an emergency. Last year, we had intended, Buildings and Grounds Committee, to replace this roof for this building. But suddenly we had a big hole in the condenser in one of the two big units for the nave. It was $28,000 to repair a 13-year-old unit, or we buy a new one. And we chose to buy a new one, which I think made sense. And we spent $10,000 extra to put dehumidification on it to protect the organ, which we have been fighting for years on the humidity problem.
So what is the number for the sacristy unit? It's been floating around.
So there are two numbers.
Yeah.
I don't recommend, nor does anybody else on Buildings and Grounds, we've talked about this a number of times over the years, we don't recommend replacing the unit over the sacristy. It's $30,000, and we can't afford to run it just for the sacristy. It's too big a unit because most of its cooling goes out into the nave. It's got two tiny vents in the sacristy, and most of it is that vent that goes all the way back above the altar. So what we are proposing, and that's what I called Sharon Friday, I just got a proposal, is about $8,000 to $10,000 on what they call a mini split, and that's one of those you've seen where they've got the thing up there. So it would be more energy efficient, it would work, it's not going to keep it really, really cool, but that's not the point. The point is to make sure that the flower cooler is not running continuously and it's able to maintain temperature, not to ruin the flowers every week.
Right.
So that's the number. And the endowment, and so I'm probably keep, of any of the lay people, I keep such close tabs on the church finances because Buildings and Grounds spends so much of the budget. And Chris sometimes gets very annoyed with me because I won't do anything until I call her and she's like, oh God, there's Barry again. If we hadn't had this endowment, what a blessing that has been to this parish. And we have spent, I'm a big believer that half of the money should go to capital and half to outreach. But circumstances in the last 6 or 7 years has been, this building has had the physical plan ignored for so long. Margaret Jones, I'm sorry? Yeah, and Margaret Jones stood up at 2018 at our annual meeting and just said, look, people, you know. And so we have been spending, and a lot of our systems are now up to date. And believe it or not, if the power goes off, we now have emergency lighting we didn't have 2 years ago. So that endowment has been a blessing. And without it, we would have been in a world of hurt budget-wise. So that has given the church flexibility to spend the budget on the things we need to, soft expenses, rather than having to spend them on an air conditioning unit, or we move out of the nave into the parish hall because we can't cool the nave, or Warden's Hall, or wherever.
Yeah.
So
does Toco Hills pay us for that space? Do they pay rent?
$1. They have to pay $1 for the.
That's our mission.
Yeah.
They
Do we
pay-
record
they-
that as a expense? The lost revenue we would otherwise have? Don't you think we should?
There's a way to
What would
do.
be the point of that?
Well, the diocesan assessment is the only reason I raise it. I want to lower the diocesan assessment.
They
Yes,
do
ma'am.
give us-
Yeah, I don't want to have a
Yeah.
deficit budget that causes our costs to go,
Yeah.
taxes to go up. But another thing about that committee is everybody's
Have to
so.
get the microphone, so
Yeah.
we're streaming this, so I want folks to hear the questions.
Yeah.
Just going back to say I appreciate the idea of gathering some diverse people and people willing to serve on such a, excuse the expression, committee.
New paradigm committee. New paradigm.
My experience is from a church and a religious foundation that gives 10% of their budget to outreach, and the other one that gave 50% of their budget to outreach. So of course things can be different. I can say this too, the only way to make up for it is for volunteers.
Yeah.
So consequently, every year that we tithe our money, our time, our presence, and our prayers.
Yeah, the 4 P's were presence, prayers. You told me on Saturday.
Money,
Yeah.
and service.
Yeah, service, I guess, were the 4 elements.
John,
Sir.
I've got to go, so I was going to.
Yeah.
John mentioned putting in the budget the expenses for Togo Hills Community Alliance. I was on the finance committee for 8 years down in St. Luke's. They did that very thing, and they did it specifically for the very reason you're talking about. Crossroads Community Ministries, which occupies a part of the building. They did all of that, and the parish showed a donation every year for their expenses. It was all funny money, meaning transferred
Right.
in one place, but it would make a deficit budget, even though it wasn't a deficit budget, and it affected the diocesan assessment. So just throwing that out there, that is one, it's creative financing. I don't understand it all, but I did know another.
And I would depend on Chris to help me walk through that. How we doing on time?
You got 20
We probably have
Not.
time for one more question.
John,
Sir,
22 after you cut off.
thank you.
And it's not a question.
Yeah.
That kind of statement as to what we're doing
Yeah,
is the truth. We are taking a loss to do something.
right. And we're taking a huge loss. A building that size maybe generates $5,000 a month. Plus we give them parking privileges and driveway privileges. So let's just guess that it's $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 in outreach that we don't acknowledge in any fashion. It doesn't show up on our good works chart. It skews our assessment to the diocese.
And the word, the operative word is acknowledged.
Yeah, acknowledge.
What?
Acknowledge. We need to get the diocese to acknowledge that contribution.
Yes. Yes.
One thing I will say, and with great love, Neva, I would not, as a parishioner, agree to a cut for the salary of the staff whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's not my goal.
Right. And it's nobody's goal, nobody wants to do it, but there are lots of things in this parish people don't want to do. And as Catherine has said to me, and as she said to you today, we have to imagine that we are a small parish. So the small parish in DC where I was for so long, 0 outreach budget. The only outreach that happened in that parish came from the individual efforts of parishioners. And they stepped forward. They did lots of great things. Outreach doesn't have to be money.
Nor does pastoral care.
Yeah, or well put. So, I mean, I think a visioning committee is important. I think, just as Joel suggested, it needs to reach across all aspects of the parish, and it has to meet this fall and move pretty quickly and decide what's most important. So, anyway.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Oh,
John.
you're more than welcome.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Thank y'all so much for coming. I appreciate your attention. But I of course. Thank you very much. Thank you.
God, that was hard.